Well, it's that time of the week, which I'm sure he's happier than last week, less nervous. The
I
man
wasn't
from
on last week. We weren't on last week.
I know, but you were happy though because you had seen the turnaround of
Oh,
Joseph
Mike.
Biden, as she says, Kamala Harris from the South, and it's looking very interesting. You must be happier because unless there's court action, Kirk Clyde, who do you think will end up holding on to that mantle from this great game called World Championship? That's World Championship Presidential Wrestling.
I'm like living in purgatory. This is the good news. This is Sheldon Adelson's newspaper, which he just kind of runs as a vanity project. Of course, Sheldon Adelson, the multi billionaire who runs Las Vegas Sands, which he might be selling. Then they'd have to change the name because they wouldn't have any properties in Las Vegas. They'll keep their Asian properties. But yeah, there it was. This was the Sunday paper. Biden 290, Trump 214. And what's remarkable is this doesn't include the electoral votes from Georgia, 16 votes there. And right now, any rational human being would say that Trump has no path forward, either here in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, or Pennsylvania. But they're still playing the game. You know, they're still soliciting donations. Mike, I have never, and I can't get them to stop. I've tried to unsubscribe. They finally have slacked off today. But for the past week, and I kid you not, this is not an exaggeration, I have been getting one email an hour from Trump or his surrogates, meaning the chairman of the RNC, the Republican National Committee, from Pence, from Trump's kids. It is the biggest email bombardment I have ever seen in my life. So it is certainly making me rethink how I would ever do an email campaign. Just saturate them. Just keep it going and make it so you can't unsubscribe, which I think is illegal, but that never stopped Trump. But the remarkable thing here, see that Biden, 290 votes, when Georgia is
Not
called
yet.
for Biden.
Not yet.
And what is remarkable is you have the two Republican senators from Georgia calling for the Republican Secretary of State there, the man who runs the elections, to resign. And the Secretary of State is going like, why? I was just doing my job. What, not enough corruption? And they can't come up with one reason. They just want him to resign because they are in this runoff on January the 5th, which will control the Senate. But there are lots of caveats there. But of course, as I often do, Mike, I got a little sidetracked because when the 16 Georgia votes are thrown into the mix, that will take Biden to 306. And one of the great ironies here is that is exactly the same number of electoral votes that Trump got in 2016. And you know what he called it? He called it a landslide, a blowout. So what's fascinating, they just right before we started to record this, no huge surprise, called the Alaska electoral race for both the president and the Senate there. The incumbent Republican Senator Sullivan maintaining his seat, kind of another disappointment for the Democrats, what we'll get into. But it's funny because when the media, the Associated Press in specific, calls those races for Republicans, they're totally cool with that. But when they try to call them for a Democrat, it's like, oh my gosh, fraud. Where is this fraud? We don't see it. But it's such a dangerous situation right now. We've even got Betfair in the UK. And to the credit, one of the sports books, I wish I remember the name, in Australia, they actually started paying their bets, I think, like a week ago. So they said, we know Biden's going to win. But Betfair, they're in England. They are not paying their bets at this time. Plus, they've got it 10-1 that Trump maintains his presidency. And so far, in the betting market, after the election, there have been 100 million pounds thrown into that mix.
Wow.
So it's simply remarkable that you have a market for who's going to be president in January after the election. That is how crazy it is. And it just goes to show it's the old Third Reich mentality of propaganda. You just keep repeating a lie over and over and over and over again.
And I agree. But I do agree. It's over and over. And that's why the impeachment, that's why the Russians under the table, which was a Hillary brilliant piece of planning there. Oh, let's deflect it. Let's deflect it to the Republicans. Oh, we'll say that Donald has got Putin under his desk. And I'm going to check. Wait one second. Hang on. No, he's not here.
Not there?
No.
Not there. The great bizarre irony of this for the QAnon and all the fraud conspiracy. Oh, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy from the socialist left. Is if this was going to be some kind of fraud, some kind of election shenanigans, well, the Democrats did a horrible job. Did a truly, truly horrible job. They underperformed the polls. I mean, the Washington Post poll had Biden up by 17 in Wisconsin. A lot of people say that's absurd. But it was nip and tuck. And all three of those states that put Trump over in 2016 came back into the fold. That is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But what an atrocious job. If there was fraud, why did Mitch McConnell win? Why did Cal Cunningham in North Carolina lose?
Yeah, 2 points. 2 points. 2 points. That's all it was.
Well, you got a situation with this guy, Cal Cunningham, the Democrat who lost the race in North Carolina. He got involved in a sex scandal. I know you have to have an enormous, bigger than mine, bigger than yours even, Mike, bigger ego than either of our egos put together.
Hard to believe.
No, because these people, I've had a chance to get to know politicians on a closer basis than I did when I was a reporter. Because when you're a reporter, you just buzz in for the event, get the soundbite, leave. When you get more involved on the ground level, you're there with them and you see how this is all they do. But of course, Cal Cunningham getting involved in the sex scandal, probably just enough. He lost by just under 100,000 votes after over, I think, 5 million plus cast. So probably just enough to cost him the race. Yeah. So the future of America hangs in the balance because some pretty boy guy in North Carolina let his little head overrule his big head. It's just disgusting. It's just vile. If you're in a relatively conservative state, it's become more progressive. But to allow that to happen is just horrific. And you say, well, what about this 50-50? It still could go either way because we have runoffs. Every state, as you may know in the U.S., more so than other nations, are like 50 almost independent countries. Not quite like you'd have in the EU, but they all have different laws. For instance, most states, the person with the most votes wins. But in Georgia, you have to have at least 50% of the vote to be declared a winner in a specific race. You don't get that. You have a runoff. And that's what's happening on January the 5th. And let's just say, so Georgia is now where all the attention is going for the next 6 weeks or so. But let's say, hypothetically, the Democrats, which managed to flip one Senate seat. That was all. Thanks to the debacle with Cal Cunningham in North Carolina. The situation in Iowa, where I thought Joni Ernst would lose for sure. Nope. Susan Collins reelected in Maine. There wasn't a single poll practically that came out that showed her in the lead. But let's say that here in Georgia, with both of their Senate seats on the line on this runoff, let's just say the Democrats do win both those seats. It would be 50-50 in the Senate.
And then Kamala has the big say.
But you have conservative Democrats there in the mix, like Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, who would then have a tremendous amount of sway. And he has already said, Joe Manchin has already said he is not going to kick the vote out so you could just move legislative agendas with just a simple majority. Right now, it's a 60-vote threshold to move legislative issues. Of course, that was killed for judicial appointments. That's why Trump got so many through. So it would be a great thing because it would be allow judicial appointments to get through, cabinet secretaries to get through. But as far as any major changes, like changing the number of votes in the Senate required for legislation to pass, that's not going to happen. Expanding the Supreme Court, not going to happen. Medicare for all, not going to happen. These are crushing disappointments. And I think one of the key reasons you have to look at this, to the Republicans' credit, they get their people in line like a spotlight. Everybody is focused on one thing. It is a spotlight. It is a simple objective that they have. The Democrats, and it's been a generational problem, The Democrats just have a floodlight. They have the moderate Democrats. They have the progressive Democrats. They have everybody who wants to have this kumbaya moment, and they just can't get it together. Republicans, focus. Democrats, it's like herding cats. They're all over the place. But you have this electoral college somehow, some way has got to go because the numbers keep coming in. Right now, Biden is ahead of Trump in the popular vote, well over 5 million popular votes. And that's almost the lead in California just by itself, almost a 2-to-1 ratio in California votes. But it looks like this lead could go to about 7 million votes by the time it's all counted because the return's coming in very slowly from California, but with the exception of a couple of congressional races there, it's like, who cares? So when it's all said and done, it could be 7 million vote margin for Biden, which is almost double what we had for Hillary Clinton. But you had this shock of Republicans actually picking up a few seats in the House of Representatives. The Democrats will still control. They have at least the 218 seats necessary out of the 435 in the House. But as far as any pickup that was hypothesized, that didn't happen. Nancy Pelosi, though, is staying the Speaker of the House. So it's a real purgatory, I think. You know, it's not the worst case scenario, perhaps, unless somehow you have the situation with Trump now where he's moving all his cronies into civilian control at the Department of Defense. We have now less than 10 weeks to go. Why all these moves? You have Bill Barr allowing his agents, allowing his folks, the Department of Justice attorneys, to investigate perceived election fraud. So what did the chief of the Election Integrity Bureau at the Department of Justice have to do when he heard about this memo and he read it? He says, I can't deal with this. I'm out of here. So he's gone. This is the guy who ran the election integrity unit at the Department of Justice for over 10 years. So we're still on a razor's edge here in the United States. And then even if Biden does get in with this endless propaganda that we're seeing from the Republicans, the question is, can Biden unite the nation? It's a hellacious job. And by the time he gets sworn in, I think he'll be 78. So you've got Mitch McConnell, who's 78. I think Nancy Pelosi, I think she's 78 too.
No, she's 80. I think she's 80.
Check it. You'll have to check it. Well,
she's a young 80. Here. Doesn't look a day over 79.
Nancy Pelosi. But the three most important people in the government are pushing, if they're not there, they're pushing 80 years old. So there's hope for us yet.
There is. Do you think this was a, just, take away your preferences towards the other side? Do you think it was this is more of a, we don't like President Trump, we must get rid of him election, more than a Biden-Harris platform?
Probably a lot of the vote was just anybody. I vote for my dog over Trump. But it's scary. It's scary because you have over 70 million people. You look at the chaos that we have in the United States. It's almost enough to make you want to cry. Evil the dog barking about it. She's so upset. But today in the United States, Mike, as we record this, New York Times just reported over 144,000 COVID cases today, Mike. I mean, and this is almost being pushed into the background. So you had all the corruption, you had an impeached president, you have we could go to 200,000 cases a day by the end of the year of COVID. And yet more than 70 million Americans said, that's okay, bring this on. I think a lot of it has to do, it's, they say racial issues important. I think more so, the folks in India certainly know about this. It's not race so much as it is money, because you did see Hispanic support for Trump increase, Black support for Trump, even LGBT support increase. So people more worried about their pocketbooks than they are worried about the rest of the community and the rest of society. And you still have the tremendous support from the non-college educated whites for Trump. And I think you still have that lingering issue there of those non-college educated whites, which I largely am. I do have some college, but I started working when I was 16 years old. But you have those folks saying, everybody's gaining on us, everybody's coming up. But if we vote for Trump, he'll still keep us from falling completely behind. And a fascinating sidebar to this election, too. This year, for the first time in American history, African Americans were not the second largest voting bloc in the election. This time around, that goes to Hispanics, which is a real telltale demographic sign that we're going to see progressing as we go forward. And one of the reasons is, I mean, I can tell just by looking around my neighborhood here in East Las Vegas, still fabulous, East Las Vegas, Nevada, that Hispanics, they like to do the wild thing because they have a lot of kids, a lot more kids. So the Hispanic population will continue to keep growing as we go forward. And there's really no way forward for the white majority to continue rule unless the Republicans put in the host of nefarious means, which they're doing everything they can to put in place.
Now, I have to ask one more thing on a different topic.
Sure.
Neighborhoods in Mexico.
I sent you some house listings.
They look
I'm
great.
staying put for now because if Trump had won, I'd be seriously making plans to be down there checking with the realtor.
Because
in,
the
Baja California, sir.
but I looked at those houses, and there was no room for the ducks, the dogs, the rabbits. What else do you have? Giraffes? Anyway.
Yeah, giraffe. Hey, speaking of dogs, there you go.
Ah, beautiful.
Hey, they're evil. Hey, they're evil. Look, she's got a duck feather on her nose.
Oh, delicious. Delicious.
On her nose.
A
But,
duck
no, I'm gonna
orange.
stay put.
Kirk Clyde from Las Vegas. Always nice to see you alive. And we'll do this again next week.
It should be fun, Mike. Be good, or well, as good as you can be.